Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. Here to wish you a very happy Morrissey Monday, a celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths. And before we get into the bulk of today's conversation, I would like to go back and amend a statement that I made during my last Morrissey Monday episode a couple of weeks ago. And if it's all the same to you, I would just like to get it out of the way right here at the very beginning because, you know, unlike the old newspapers who, whenever it was that they had to make a retraction, they would always hide it at the very back of the paper right next to the classified ads, whereas, you know, I prefer to print it right on the very front page because despite the fact that this is a relatively dumb and insignificant little show that I do here, my integrity is of the utmost importance. And, you know, on my last Morrissey Monday episode, I made a statement that was unintentional, albeit a little bit short-sighted, and it is something that I have been regretting ever since. It was during an episode in which we were discussing the fate, if there is a fate, to Morrissey's lost album, the now mythical Bonfire of Teenagers. Throughout the course of that episode, I was wondering aloud whether or not that episode was ever going to see the light of day. And towards the beginning of that episode, as we were discussing the origins of the Bonfire of Teenager drama, I paraphrased a statement that was made by Morrissey in 2021 when it was that he announced the album Bonfire of Teenagers. I'm going to paraphrase his quote here once again because I don't have the exact wording written in front of me, but in 2021 when Morrissey announced the album Bonfire of Teenagers, he said something to the effect of, "The worst year of my life has produced the greatest album of my career." And at that point in time, during the course of that episode, I made the assertion that by worst year of my life, Morrissey was referring to COVID. Now, a viewer of that episode, and I like to give credit where credit is due, this was somebody that goes by the name Erica6249, pointed out and reminded me that 2020 was also the year that Morrissey's mother passed away. So I concede that by Morrissey referring to 2020 as the worst year of his life, instead of COVID, he was probably referencing the passing of his mother, and I do apologize for any sort of misunderstanding that I threw out there. Again, this was something that I was aware of. I had sort of forgotten that Morrissey's mother passed away in 2020. I think one reason why I did think that Morrissey was referring to COVID, and again, I'm not trying to defend what I said. I apologize. I fall on my sword 100%. But I do remember Morrissey being very critical of the whole COVID shutdown situation. That was something, and again, you know, I'm not really a political person. This is not a political show. I hate all of that stuff. But, you know, that was one of the things that I did sort of agree with Morrissey on in terms of COVID and the way it was handled. Now, 6 years after the fact, it's easy to look back with 2020 hindsight. But even when we were living in it, I sort of agreed with the things that Morrissey said. I was somebody that was a victim of the shutdown in terms of not being able to work. My wife and I relocated during the shutdown because we were unable to work and we had expenses that were piling up. And, you know, I've said it before on this channel, I shall say it again, the reason why we landed here in Nashville was because this was a place that was just more open than where we came from, and we really wanted to go back to work. I was one of those people that was not necessarily a COVID denier, but I was also not a COVID phobe. I felt like everybody should have the opportunity to handle COVID however it was that they saw fit. If you were somebody that felt vulnerable, felt at risk, I certainly believed that you should be able to take every precaution. But if you were somebody like me that felt relatively healthy, was willing and able to go to work, I felt like you should have been given that opportunity as well. I remember having conversations with people who actually thought that we should mandate the vaccine. I thought to myself, holy shit, we have lost our minds here. Anyway, I do want to thank once again Erica6249 for reminding me that Morrissey's mother passed away in 2020, and that is more likely what it was that he was referencing in that statement than, the COVID shutdown. So again, I want to thank her very much. I apologize 100%. It was something that was unintentional, although be it a little bit short-sighted, as I mentioned before. Trust me, I'm not afraid to stick Morrissey in the corner when I feel like it is necessary, but I feel like that was a statement that was a little bit unfair, and ever since it was pointed out to me, it is something that has bothered me. Now, as far as the rest of this episode is concerned, throughout the rest of that episode, in which we were discussing Bonfire of Teenagers and whether or not it will ever see the light of day, towards the end of that episode, I was going through the track listing of that album, and I was discussing songs that I had and had not heard up until that point in time. Now, to sort of briefly go back and reiterate what it was that we were talking about, we were going through the track listing of the album. The first song on Bonfire of Teenagers is a song called I Am Veronica. Unless I'm mistaken, I do believe that that was the song that was supposed to feature the backing vocals or supporting vocals of Miley Cyrus. I remember when it was announced that Miley Cyrus was going to be appearing on the new Morrissey album, I was utterly perplexed. I remember thinking to myself, why? What can she possibly contribute? I mean, on Dog on a Chain, you get backing vocals from Thelma Houston, and from there we go to Miley Cyrus. I mean, how the mighty have fallen, Steve. Now, fortunately, I should say, of course, after Morrissey found himself embroiled in controversy, Miley Cyrus demanded that her vocals be taken off of the Morrissey album. I can tell you, for at least speaking for myself, I was not sobbing, son. I cannot even begin to tell you how much I dislike Miley Cyrus. Thelma Houston is royalty. Miley Cyrus is human vomit. I always love it when somebody terrible thinks that they are punishing you by removing themselves from your presence. I Am Veronica is a song that I did see live twice in 2024 in person. It was a song that I did enjoy very much. The second song off of Bonfire of Teenagers was the single Rebels Without Applause, a song that I've heard a million times, a song that I loved when it was released, and I still do. At the time, I thought it was one of the better songs that Morrissey had released in the last several years, a song that I could not wait to see live. I saw Morrissey twice in 2023 here in Nashville and out in Memphis, Tennessee. He sort of neglected to play the song Rebels Without Applause on that tour. The next song after that is a song called Cure Wax Crack. I did see Rebels Without Applause in 2024 in Birmingham and Indianapolis, and that is a song that I would say the show I saw in Birmingham, that song was incredible live. Actually, the show in Birmingham in 2024 was a very excellent show in my opinion. By the time I got to Indianapolis towards the end of that tour, you could tell that Morrissey and the band were both, sort of running on fumes, and their rendition of Rebels Without Applause was a little bit flat. That entire show in Indianapolis in 2024 was a little bit flat. Morrissey himself said that he was not necessarily feeling his best that evening. He had Flint throat. I believe he described it as he had come in from either Detroit or Flint, Michigan. I forget which one it was. But the third song off of Bonfire of Teenagers is another song that I've heard live, at least, via YouTube. That is a song called Cure Wax Crack. It is a relatively short song. It is hard to kind of get a grip, get an idea of what that song is about. But it is a song that I liked very much. Another song, the fourth song off of Bonfire of Teenagers is a song called Ha Ha Harlem. This is a song that I have not heard at all, whether it is the studio version or anything live off of YouTube. It is not something that I have heard at all. The title track of the album is a song called Bonfire of Teenagers. Obviously, this is the song that is about the Manchester bombing, which occurred at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England. Bonfire of Teenagers is a song that I have heard live many different times, at least on YouTube. Not a song that I got a chance to see live in person, but it is a very powerful song. It is an incredible song. It is probably, of the songs that I have heard off of Bonfire of Teenagers, it is certainly one of my favorites. The next two songs, My Funeral and Diana Doors, are both songs that I've never heard either, whether it be a studio version or anything live off of YouTube. There's two songs that follow that, one being called I X Love You, the other one being, of course, The Telephone Rings. These are also songs that I saw live in person back in 2024 in Birmingham and Indianapolis. I mentioned it when I talked about the tour in 2024. That tour sort of reminded me of the tour back in 2002. I think it was the Greatest Hits tour. Perhaps it was the Best of tour. Not that it really matters what the difference is, but I remember on that tour in 2002, Morrissey played 3 songs that would eventually end up on You Are the Quarry in 2004. And I remember leaving that show very excited, having heard the 3 new songs about whatever the new album was going to be. Now, at that point in time, I don't believe, if I'm not misremembering, I don't believe that in 2002 Morrissey had announced You Are the Quarry yet, or any intention of releasing You Are the Quarry yet. Obviously, there weren't really things like social media back in 2002, but when I saw the tour in 2024 in Birmingham and Indianapolis, that's what it reminded me of, because on that tour, Morrissey played 4 new songs that were supposed to be on the Bonfire of Teenagers album. Now, as far as I X Love You, that was a song that I liked enough. It was not necessarily my favorite of the 4 new songs that I heard, but I thought it was a very solid album track. It is definitely a Morrissey song in terms of its lyrical content. The song after that, of course, The Telephone Rings, is a song that I have seen live 4 times in person. I saw that song twice in 2023 here in Nashville and out in Memphis. I also saw that song twice in 2024 in Birmingham and Indianapolis. I was a little bit, I don't want to say disappointed, but I was a little bit, annoyed that in 2023 Morrissey decided to play this song instead of Rebels Without Applause, because Rebels Without Applause is a song that I love just so very much. I X Love You is a song that of course, The Telephone Rings is a song I just don't get. Of all of the songs that I've heard off of Bonfire of Teenagers, and there are a handful of songs that I have not heard on the album yet, I would say that, of course, The Telephone Rings is easily my least favorite. I remember in 2023, not long after I saw Morrissey here in Nashville, he appeared on television in New York. I believe it was on television station Fox 5 up in New York City, where he was interviewed about the album Bonfire of Teenagers, and he performed a song live. The song he decided to play live on television was the song, of course, The Telephone Rings, and at the time, I was very confused as to why it was he was plugging a song that, in my opinion, was just so weak. Honestly, of the songs I've heard off of Bonfire, of course, The Telephone Rings is my absolute least favorite. Now, again, after my last episode, I received another comment from a viewer of that episode, which is always a little bit awkward talking about viewers of these episodes, because I do find it a little bit funny that anybody watches this just nonsensical garbage. Now, keep in mind, I'm very grateful. It makes me very happy that people watch this channel, but I have to be honest with you and tell you that I find it a little bit confusing. Now, in my life, this channel sort of scratches a couple of itches for me. I think I've mentioned it on this channel in the past. As a kid, starting off probably in middle school, going all the way through the end of my senior year in high school, it was my dream to get into broadcasting. I wanted to be a disc jockey on the radio. I became just obsessed with music at a very young age. I was a kid that was just glued to MTV whenever it was I had an opportunity. I did not have a lot of friends. I did not have much social interaction with my classmates, and music and MTV became an escape for me. It was something that just engulfed my entire life. I have never been, nor do I ever see a day when I will ever consider myself to be a casual music fan. I cannot relate to people that are casual music fans. When I ask people what kind of music they like or what artists they listen to, whenever anybody tells me, oh, whatever's on the radio, I simply cannot even wrap my mind around that statement. And even as a young kid, I knew that in some capacity, I wanted to work in the music industry. And I decided that broadcasting was going to be my ticket in. Broadcasting was going to be my way of contributing to the music world. I was also, as a little kid, I was very obsessed with a television sitcom, probably still my favorite television sitcom of all time. This was a show that was introduced to me by my father, a show that he and I bonded over, a show that he and I still quote to each other whenever it is that we get a chance to hang out, that being WKRP in Cincinnati. Still a show that I can go back and watch anytime. I always sort of pictured myself in middle school and in high school as some sort of a Johnny Fever. I thought that I was going to go into the broadcasting industry and I was going to become very successful. I was going to turn the industry on its head. But unfortunately in my life, the people that were in my life, a lot of the adults in my life, were very discouraging when it came to my interest in pursuing a career in broadcasting. In fact, I remember one time my grandfather, who was one of my heroes, I grew up spending my summers in Oregon with my grandparents. My grandfather was always giving me guff about wanting to become a disc jockey, wanting to get into radio. And I remember right around the time I was in 12th grade, my grandfather was just really on his soapbox about my broadcasting aspirations. He was convinced I was going to end up broke. I was going to end up a drug addict living in his car. I was going to make no money. And I remember telling him, I said, well, grandfather, if I ever become a famous disc jockey, I know at some level you will be proud of me. And he said something to me that stuck with me. Something that, I don't know what it was just probably who he was and what he meant to me, but he said, truthfully, if you ever become a disc jockey, I can't imagine anything more shameful. Now, I'm not blaming him for the fact that I decided to not pursue that particular vocation once I got out of high school, but at a certain point in time, I decided that I was not going to pursue a career in broadcasting. And looking back on it now, this was probably not something that I was willing to admit at the time, but as you get older and you take inventory and you learn to become a little bit more honest with yourself, you can look back on things with a different perspective. And looking back on it, I probably chickened out. I probably did not have the confidence it took to go out there and throw myself into a very competitive public industry. So what I did instead was I pursued, a traditional educational experience on a college campus. And, I started taking classes that I wasn't overly interested in. And, predictably, I ended up foundering. And after 5 semesters, I ended up dropping out and I moved to the Bay Area and I just started living more of an urban life. And at a certain point in time, around 1996 or so, I sort of took up my first career as a baker. This was a job that I very much loved. It was something that I was relatively good at. And, one of the things about baking is, you end up having to work really weird hours. I remember distinctly when I worked at that bakery, I worked at 1:30. I think I worked 1:30 in the morning till about noon. You have to get there at 1:30 in the morning. You basically have to be baking by 2 o'clock, and by 6 o'clock, you're expected to have this whole business open. And then for the rest of the day, I would fill wholesale orders, and I would fill orders that were needed in the shop, locally. And I would get to work at about 1:30 in the morning, and for a long time, I would bring in CDs, I would listen to music, or, I would listen to terrestrial radio. There was a radio station in San Francisco. It's probably still there. I do not listen to terrestrial radio. I've not listened to terrestrial radio in many, many years, but there was a radio station in San Francisco. It's probably still there. It was called Live 105. It was the alternative radio station in San Francisco. And, I would spend my late nights and early mornings listening to CDs or listening to Live 105. But even back then, even in the mid to late 1990s, I discovered that terrestrial radio, in terms of music radio, was something that was becoming very boring, even on the alternative radio station in San Francisco. I mean, there was about 10 songs that they would play on a loop over and over again, and I found myself just becoming very bored with the whole, whatever the word is, the whole platform. I just found it to be completely uninteresting. I ended up getting bored of the CDs I would bring into work, and so eventually one day I decided to flip over to the AM band of the radio, something that I'd never really done before, and I decided that I was going to give talk radio a chance, and I discovered somebody back in 1996 that literally altered the course of my life forever. This was somebody that has since passed away, but somebody that if I ever got a chance to meet, I would thank them incessantly because they were such a huge impact on my life. Somebody that I still talk about all the time. Anybody willing to listen to my interest in this particular person, I will have them cornered. But in 1996, working overnights in the Bay Area, I discovered the wondrous world of Mr. Art Bell. Art Bell, back in those days, was broadcast in San Francisco, at least, on a relatively unfortunate radio station, really. He was broadcast on KSFO, which, once it got into the political, which it was a political radio station, overnight they played Art Bell, but during the day and, the mainstream hours, it was a political station. It was a real right-wing radio station. I remember the guy that followed up Art Bell in the morning was a local host from San Francisco named Lee Rogers. This guy was like a rabid Wolverine. Apart from Lee Rogers, it was the station that broadcast people like Rush Limbaugh and Michael Savage and Michael Reagan and all of those guys, people that I just could not tolerate, people whose politics I had no interest in. But I remember listening to Art Bell every single night for years, and he gave birth to my passion, my love of talk radio. And talk radio is something that I've been very interested in basically ever since 1996 when I first began baking at this bakery in the Bay Area. And I remember, right around this same time, I was sort of becoming glad that I did not pursue a career in terrestrial radio, at least in terms of becoming a disc jockey, because radio had become so formulaic. Even back in those days, I mean, I don't even listen to radio now, so I have no idea what in the hell is going on out there. In a way, I'm glad I never pursued that career, because if I was my age now, being forced to listen to Guns N' Roses and AC/DC and Fleetwood Mac all day, every day, I can assure you that I would blow my brains out. So I became a huge Art Bell fan. I became a huge talk radio fan. And I remember many years ago, when I first discovered this whole world of podcasting, I thought to myself, wow, this is amazing. This is something that is unbelievable. This is going to change the world forever. Imagine being somebody who has this little thing that they are just a nerd on, and they can broadcast themselves to a global, audience, and they can find their people out there that will geek out with them. Now, I did not, at that point in time when I first discovered the world of podcasting, I did not imagine people becoming rich and famous off of podcasting. That is not my intention on this particular little program at all. I've mentioned it on this channel many times in the past. I am not here to become rich. I am not here to become famous. I am not here to become a dumb little influencer. This is a hobby. This is a passion project. I'm in it for the love of the game. So one of the itches that this channel scratches is my love of talk radio, my love of podcasting. And I remember very early on when I started doing this channel, or actually right before I started doing this channel, because this was something that I talked about and thought about doing for a very long time. I remember boring my wife to tears, literally year after year, telling her, someday I'm going to get on YouTube. I'm going to have a show. It's going to be the Jugs. My wife, I think, eventually got bored of me, blathering on about how I was going to take over the world of YouTube and podcasting. And one day she told me, hey, look, man, put the rubber on the road. Either do it or stop talking. So one Christmas, she bought me a microphone and she bought me a book about podcasting. And I remember reading this book about podcasting because, yes, I'm a nerd. This is what I do. I don't really have any friends. I don't have a career. I don't have any prospects. This is what I do. And in the book, it talked about podcasting. Rule 1A, when it comes to podcasting or doing YouTube, is to find something that you are passionate enough about that you can do it week in and week out, and month in and month out, and year in and year out without losing interest. And I remember trying to come up with what my thing was in terms of YouTube and potential podcasting and the whole archaic records world. And I remember it hit me. Obviously, it has to do something with music, but within music, it has to have something to do with Morrissey, somebody that I have been a huge fan of for 32 years. And that's one of the funnest things about doing this dumb little show that I do here, is the connection that you make with other Morrissey fans. The fact that people are willing to sit there and watch this ugly mush spout on endlessly about his love of Mr. Stephen Patrick Morrissey, and the fact that people engage and interact and have fun with this show is something that means everything to me. I literally cannot tell you how much it means to me. So that was a very long, boring way of telling you that after my last episode, another viewer of this channel, somebody that goes by the name of Southpaw Grammar 448, told me, he said, hey, Jim, just so you know, 2 of the songs you mentioned having not heard off of Bonfire of Teenagers are in fact available out there on YouTube if you are so interested. I mean, why don't you do your job, you worthless parasite? And I remember thinking to myself, worthless parasite? Well, that's a little bit harsh. So I responded to Southpaw Grammar 448 by saying, really, worthless parasite, why don't you come over here and say that to my face so I can take you outside and sweep up the sidewalks with you? And then I remembered that this is Nashville and we don't have sidewalks. That's a true story, by the way. Nashville does not have sidewalks. How is it that a city this big can literally not have sidewalks? Now, if you go downtown to Broadway, where all the tourists hang out, yes, there are sidewalks. But out here in the neighborhoods of Nashville, Tennessee, there are literally not sidewalks. I don't understand what it is. I mean, this is not exactly Mayberry. There's over 1 million people in this town. We recently had to pass an initiative to build sidewalks here in Nashville, Tennessee. I think it's because most of the people that live here, most of the maggot people that live here, one of the things they crow about Tennessee is that there's no state income tax here in this state. Have you driven the roads in Nashville? There may not be state income tax, but we have potholes that homeless people are living in. I'm not even kidding you. But anyway, Southpaw Grammar 448 did tell me that there were 2 songs that I mentioned off of the Bonfire of Teenagers album that I had as of yet not heard available on YouTube. So I immediately ran out and listened to them, and I have to tell you that both of the songs that I recently discovered within the past couple of weeks are absolutely unbelievable. The first song that they mentioned was a song called I Live in Oblivion. This is a song, according to Morrissey's solo wiki, that has been played live about between 5 and 10 times. This is a song that I absolutely love. This is a song that is just beautifully bleak. To me, And again, I always say this whenever it comes to me interpreting these songs. I am not telling you that this is what the song means. This is what the artist is saying. I am not somebody that is going to put words in Morrissey's head or in his pen. I'm too dumb to be qualified to make any such statement. But what it means to me, whenever I interpret these songs, it always is what it means to me. This song is about the indignity of growing old. You always hear about how wonderful and beautiful it is to grow old. I think Morrissey is taking a more realistic look at the situation. This is a person in the song that finds themselves one day in convalescence, or perhaps even worse, hospice, being force-fed some unimaginable slurry by someone who sees you as nothing more than a paycheck. The people that may have loved you while you were still viable are too busy to be bothered. So you're left in the care of some flunky with a name tag. You're reduced to being nothing more than a burden, not only to yourself, but also your family and probably the state. This is a song that is just unbelievably amazing. This song, in a way, sort of reminds me of my grandfather. My grandfather was somebody I mentioned a few minutes ago as I was boring you with my dreams of becoming a famous broadcaster. My grandfather was somebody that was really one of my heroes. I spent my summers up in Oregon with my grandparents, and it was something that I always very much appreciated. It was something that I look back on now with a tremendous amount of fondness. My grandfather and I had a relationship that was very special. There was a bond between the two of us that was very unbreakable. He was the type of guy, he grew up in Oklahoma. He was a military veteran. He moved out to California, and he became a career firefighter. He was a man that was very much of his generation. He was not macho, but he was very stoic. He was very unemotional. He was very manly. He was very proud. But as he got older and as his health began to deteriorate over time, this was a person that became an absolute shadow of themselves. I remember the last couple of times I saw my grandfather, it was literally heartbreaking. The man was riddled with cancer. I don't think there wasn't a type of cancer that hadn't latched itself onto him. He was reduced to basically nothing. He was being forced into treatment by people that I think had a harder time with his mortality than he did. There was an instance that still bothers me to this day where somebody snapped a photograph of him literally lying on his deathbed without even his pride intact, and they posted it all over social media. It was something that literally made me want to vomit. I remember thinking to myself, do you not remember who this man was? Yes, he's in this state now, but this is not who he is. This is not who he was. You should not put that out there publicly. If nothing else, this man is at least entitled to his dignity. I love this song. I am so glad that Southpaw Grammar 448 brought this song to my attention. Again, another one of those songs that is just Morrissey, being the master of his craft. I mean, it is unbelievable. The other song that was pointed out to me by Southpaw Grammar 448 that I had not heard is probably, of the songs I have now heard, off of Bonfire of Teenagers, probably my favorite. Much like off the new album, Monsters of Pig Alley, it's the last song on Bonfire of Teenagers, and of the songs I've heard, it is far and away the best. The song is called Saint in a Stained Glass Window. Again, a song that was pointed out to me by a viewer. I had to go onto YouTube, I had to find a video of it, and then I went and I researched the lyrics. Just absolutely amazing. This song reminds me of a cross between Seasick and Asleep. I've been utterly obsessed with this song over the past couple of weeks. Arguably, as I said before, the best song I've heard. Off of Bonfire of Teenagers, this song is an anthem for anybody that struggles with depression, is a social bench warmer, feels like an outsider, an alien among their own kind. somebody that questions their place on this planet. Again, as I said before, this is Morrissey as the master of his craft. This song is unbelievably beautiful. The thing I love about Morrissey the most is that he does not write these lyrics in order to sell them to those of us that feel this way. Morrissey is right there next to us. I think that helps explain why it is that the bond between Morrissey and his fans is what it is. It's concrete. I always love it when people that, want to cancel Morrissey think that they are going to persuade us to, what's the word? They're going to persuade us to deprogram. But because they don't like the things that Morrissey says and does. I think that people that expect us to walk away from our fandom of Morrissey greatly underestimate us and our devotion. There is just something about Morrissey lyrics that I think touch all of us. Morrissey's fans are much like the man himself. We are all a little bit crazy. I love the song Saint in a Stained Glass Window. Again, I cannot thank Southpaw Grammar 448 any more than I already have for pointing out the fact to me that these songs were on YouTube. Again, I probably should have done more research before I ran my fat yap. As far as anything else this week going on, obviously, there is a lot of news to discuss. First and foremost, most importantly, the new EP, the deluxe edition of Notre Dame, is officially out and in stores, and I can tell you right now, I personally could not be any happier with it. I love this new EP. I mentioned it when it was announced that I love the artwork. I love the picture on the back. Of course, this is a picture that we've all been very familiar with over the past year or so with Morrissey using this photography as a lot of the promo work for his upcoming tour. I love this picture. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about the flowers coming out of the trunks, but I've sort of gotten used to it. At first, this was a photograph that I was a little bit unsure of, to be honest with you, but I do love the artwork on the front. I think that this is a much better album cover than the one that actually made the album. Although I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think the artwork on Makeup is a Lie is something that has sort of grown on me over time. It's just ridiculously absurd in a sort of typical Morrissey way. What I really love, though, about the new EP is this inner photograph right here. Honestly, this should be the cover. This is absolutely amazing. I love the t-shirt. I love the stance. I love his little coif on his hair. I love the fact that the album was printed on this, as they describe it. It looks orange in here because of the lighting, but it is a lemonade yellow vinyl. What is most important to me, though, about this particular EP is having the new material on some sort of a physical format. Obviously, I'm a person living in Nashville. You have to be a person that drives a lot. I commute to my job out in Brentwood, Tennessee, so I spend a lot of time in my car. I listen to a lot of music on Spotify and other streaming platforms, so it's been nice having the music on the streaming services, but in my opinion, until you can hold it in your hand tangibly, it does not really exist. And having the new songs Hello Hell and Happy New Tears in a physical format that you can touch and just love it, I just love it so much, means the world to me. As far as the orchestrated version of Notre Dame, which was the only song off of this EP that I had not heard, yeah, it's pretty snug. It's not necessarily as snug as the original version, nor did I think it was going to be. Notre Dame is a song that I absolutely love. The orchestrated version of it is very nice, very beautiful. As I said a second ago, I like the original version slightly more, but I'm just so glad that this is finally out in stores. Of course, it was pushed back a month. Originally, it was supposed to come out in May. Now, normally, under normal circumstances, when it was announced that they were pushing this EP back a month, I would have thought to myself the worst. I would have thought, okay, it's not coming out. Something bad happened with the label. Morrissey got dropped, but I don't know. I don't know the answer, but it would appear, from my perspective, it would appear that Morrissey and the record label have a decent relationship going. So, I'm very happy with it. I will be spinning this record ad nauseum throughout the course of the next couple of weeks. I'm still loving the new album. Of course, we've been living with it for a while. In other Smiths-related news, though, in terms of new releases, Johnny Marr, since I last spoke to you, released his new single, Spin. It is a song that I like very much. His new album, Age of Everything, is going to be released October 1st in the UK, I believe. October 2nd here in the United States. Johnny Marr's solo music is music that I do enjoy. I do not necessarily think that it knocks the world off of its axis, but I enjoy it for what it is. Johnny Marr, in my opinion, is the greatest guitar player of all time. I always love seeing him live. Now, if he were playing in the same town on the same night as Mr. Steve, be honest with me, you know who you're going to go see every day of the week. One thing I love about Johnny Marr, and this is not even his fault, but ever since Morrissey has come under all of this scrutiny and he's so hated and reviled by, the thought police and the cancellation patrol, is I love it when people will tell you that, well, Johnny Marr's a better singer and songwriter anyway. Wrong, son. I do love Johnny Marr. He is the greatest guitar player of all time. He is a founding member of the greatest band that has ever existed. Whenever I get a chance to go see him live, I'm not going to pass it up. I was talking about this yesterday when I was talking about my experience recently going out and seeing the Human League. I mean, Johnny Marr played here 6 or 7 months ago at a place called the Brooklyn Bowl, and unfortunately for him, he didn't really draw super well. He did have a band open for him that I very much love, a band called His Lordship. That was actually how I got turned on to that band. But, Johnny Marr's solo music, in my opinion, is what it is. It's good, it's great guitar playing, it's decent songwriting, and it's decent singing. Johnny Marr's voice, in my opinion, is, it's a little bit bland. It's sort of an every voice. It doesn't offend you, but again, it doesn't necessarily, knock the world off of its orbit. I'm very much looking forward to the new album. I will bring it to the channel when it's released. I will purchase it on vinyl when it comes out. I am a collector. Anything that has to do with any of the members of the Smiths, or, for that matter, Morrissey's solo band, I'm going to be very interested in. I mean, I sat through Boz Bohr's Morrissey reimagined Autopsy. I think I can pretty much survive anything after that. But I am very much looking forward to the new Johnny Marr album. The single Spin, I enjoy it. If you haven't listened to it, it's on Spotify. It pretty much sounds the same as everything else Johnny Marr does. Unlike Morrissey, who's always sort of evolving and changing in terms of his sound and his style, you basically know what you're going to get in terms of Johnny Marr and his solo material. Now, one last piece of news that came out this week, actually just a couple of days ago, Morrissey has officially kicked off his European tour. I believe the town is called Lillestrøm in Norway. I should know. Those are my people. I am of Norwegian heritage, not that I've ever been there. I'm a Californian at the end of the day, but I saw a few still photographs. Morrissey looks good. I've said this before. I shall say it again. I'm not interested in knowing what it is that he's going to play. So if you bring that information into the comments section, I'm going to virtually say, la, 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 la. I'm not listening. I don't want to hear it, because I love to go into these shows as blind as is possible. I have tickets for 2 shows in October 21st and 25th, I believe it is, up in Louisville, Kentucky, and here in Nashville, Tennessee. I am beyond excited. I am like a little kid on Christmas Eve whenever it is that Morrissey announces a tour. Even 32 years into my fandom, I absolutely cannot wait. I'm hoping to make it to 6 more shows after these 2, which are going to happen. I'm not even going to question it. I'm just going to throw that positivity out there into the universe, because there's enough negativity out there. I'm tired of it. These shows are going to happen in October. Morrissey's excited about the album. We're excited about the album. I absolutely cannot wait to hear some of the new material from this stage. I always say this when it comes to new artists. All I want a lot of times in terms of these artists. Now, I have an episode coming up. I keep plugging it. But I've been busy. I was out of town for a while. And, sometimes I have to be honest with you. If I neglect to post an episode here on Archaic Records for a week or 2 weeks or sometimes 3 weeks, yes, there are times when I'm legitimately busy. But to be perfectly honest with you, there are times when I just have to get out of here because I get into my own head and I think that I am just the worst human being in the world. I'm wasting everybody's time, including myself. So it takes me a while sometimes to get these episodes up. I have an episode written and ready to go about the new Social Distortion album, an album that I like, an album that I'm a fan of, a band that I like, a band that I'm a fan of. Not necessarily the greatest band of all time, but it's a good album. My expectations for a band like Social Distortion is make an album that, is good enough that when you play the new songs live, I won't want to go take a beer and piss break. And that, I think, is accomplished by the new Social Distortion album. This album is much better than that. Not only will I not mind hearing material off of this new album, I am eagerly anticipating it. Something I'm also sort of eagerly anticipating, we started off this episode many weeks ago, talking about 2020, talking about COVID, talking about my short-sighted statement when Morrissey was referring to the worst year of his life. Another album that I would love to see something live off of is Morrissey's last album, I Am Not a Dog on a Chain. I was just thinking about this as I was driving home from work last night. I do not believe I have seen a single song off of this album in person. Now, obviously, this was the COVID album. This album came out in 2020. Therefore, this album did not get a tour. It was not really celebrated. It entered into the marketplace and then it just sort of floated away. The reaction to this record by fans was mixed. I've heard people that really like this album. I've heard people say they really don't like this album. I've quoted this individual in the past as to saying one person told me that they hated this album so much they wished it had never been released. I like this album. Is it as good as Makeup Is a Lie? No. But I think it is as good as California Sun. It's as good as Low in High School. It is as good, better than World Peace Is None of Your Business. There are songs off of this album that I would love to see live. I have not heard a single song off of this album in person. Now, in terms of songs that I would not want to hear off of Dog on a Chain, there are a couple I can think of immediately. My second least favorite Morrissey song of all time is the song Truth About Ruth. That is a song that I could simply live without, although I will say that my least favorite Morrissey song of all time is Dear God, Please Help Me, a song that I did see live twice back in 2024 in Birmingham and Indianapolis. And despite the fact that it is my least favorite song of all time, when he played it live, I actually enjoyed it because it was a song that I'd not seen live before. I always love seeing stuff that I'd not seen before. I remember when he broke in to Dear God, Please Help Me in Birmingham, I remember thinking to myself, this is awesome. I hate this song, but it's awesome. I haven't seen it before. That's one of the great things about Morrissey. That's one of the great things about seeing him live. You never know what you're going to get. That's why I don't want to know. That's why I go into this stuff blind, because I'm the guy, I drive to the show, I imagine in my head what I'm going to hear, what I'm not going to hear, things I do want to hear, things I don't want to hear. There are definitely things on this album that I would take over things that I've heard way too many times. Things like Girlfriend in a Coma, and You're the One for Me, Fatty, and We Hate It When Our Friends Become Successful. If I got a chance to hear What Kind of People Live in These Houses, Knockabout World, Once I Saw the River Clean, My Hurling Days Are Over, I would love seeing any of those songs live. Again, Morrissey kicked off his tour last night or this past couple of days in Lillestrøm, Norway. I did see a few still photographs. I am not interested in what he's playing. I do not want to hear a single note. As far as I could tell, Morrissey looks awesome and he seems excited and ready to go. We talked about this back in May when we did Morrissey's birthday episode here on Archaic Records. Morrissey has a very busy second half of 2026. I do wish him the best of luck, not only selfishly, because I do want those shows in October to take place here out in Kentucky and Tennessee, but I genuinely wish him well for the rest of this year. The man is 67 years old, and I love him with all of my heart, despite the fact that, yes, there are times I take him to the woodshed, but there are times I would argue that he deserves it, son. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. Thank you so much for paying attention to this channel. I always appreciate it. I always appreciate the interaction. That is one of the things that I love about doing the Morrissey Monday show. I love, as much as I love Morrissey fans. And I'm not just saying that to swing from your sack. I think that Morrissey fans are infinitely interesting. Morrissey fans are passionate. Morrissey fans are knowledgeable. Morrissey fans are opinionated. And I love every single second of it. I love the interaction that I get on this channel, whether it be positive or negative. Now, I don't have a tendency to get a lot of negative feedback on the Morrissey episodes. I'm very grateful for that. But I love the fact that I get to do this show. I love the fact that anybody pays attention to it. I cannot wait to continue on doing these episodes. I cannot wait to continue on seeing Morrissey live back in October. So thank you so very much. I really mean that. Genuinely, again, I want to thank the two people I mentioned earlier on this episode, Erica6249 and Southpaw Grammar 448. Keep the comments and the interaction coming. This is one of the fun things about being a Morrissey fan, is the fans. Morrissey fans are the best. We are the best fans in rock and roll. Everybody else can kiss my rosy red ass, Mahoney. Anyway, be sure to be sure to go out and support your local record store like Variety Records here in Nashville, Tennessee. Check back for Morrissey Monday, a celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And looks like we've made it through another week. I'm heading into work in just a few minutes, so I'm going to let you get out of here. I myself am going to get out of your hair. So until next time, my friends, talk to you then.